Hello. Welcome. We are very happy that you are here. My name is Elizabeth Klaczynski, and I am an Associate Curator of Exhibitions here at the VMHC. I'm delighted to welcome you to this noontime lecture in our Scholar Series. We first wish to acknowledge the generous support of Conrad Mercer Hall, who has endowed the VMHC Scholar Series. Conrad serves as the Honorary Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees of this institution and has been a champion of our work for decades. We would also wish to acknowledge former VMHC President and CEO, Dr. Charles F. Bryan, whom this series also honors. Please join us again on Thursday, June 19th at noon to hear award-winning journalist Jerry Willis discuss her new book on Elizabeth Van Lew, Lincoln's Lady Spy Master, the untold story of the abolitionist Southern belle who helped win the Civil War. So before we begin this afternoon's program, this is your friendly reminder to turn off all your mobile phones, anything else that squeaks, beeps, all those things. To start off this great lecture, which we are all very excited about, just a little bit of context. Blind musician Jame Lee, Jimmie Strother's 1936 recordings at the Virginia State Prison Farm provide a unique window into traditional music in the early 20th century. Just as important, his life and lyrics tell us much about the experiences of Black people in America in an age of segregation and heightened racial violence. Strother sang about labor exploitation, sundown towns, and the dangers of the world, all things he knew about intimately as a Black man in the South. And today we have Gregg Kimball and his bandmates here to help us explore Strother's music and legacy. Gregg is a historian, musician, and author. He is currently the senior consulting historian for the Shako Institute, a national organization based in Richmond, dedicated to examining the enduring effects of slavery on American life. He was formerly a director at the Library of Virginia. Gregg is the author of American City, Southern Place, A Cultural History of Antebellum Richmond. He is dedicated to public education and civic projects, working on everything from the restoration of Richmond's Tredegar Ironworks to a series of state historical markers commemorating Virginia's musical heritage. Gregg has performed traditional music in the Mid-Atlantic region for more than 25 years and presented artists at a variety of festivals, including the National Folk Festival and the Lowell Folk Festival. So on a personal note, I worked for Gregg at the Library of Virginia before joining the VMHC. I am lucky to be one of the many, many baby historians he has mentored over the years, and I'm very profoundly grateful to know him. Best work dad ever. On that note, yes. Singer Cheryl Warner, who also is here, was one of the first women to attend the Virginia Commonwealth University's Jazz Studies program. Her rich, expressive voice has developed over 35 years of singing in the folk, jazz, and blues traditions. Cheryl performs with Gregg and Rick Manson as Cheryl Warner and the Southside Homewreckers, taking the stage at numerous blues festivals and the International Blues Challenge in Memphis and at the Altria Theater with the Richmond Symphony. Rick Manson has been playing harmonica for more than 35 years. He was a student and protege of Richmond and New York blues legend Nat Riddles. Rick has played with several area bands, including the Detonators and the Brian Doherty Trio. His influences range from Little Walter to Charlie McCoy to Sonny Terry. So please join me again in welcoming Gregg, Cheryl, and Rick.
Well, I just have to say thank you for that. And it's not hard to mentor really smart people and who you know are going to make a wave in their profession. And, you know, as you get towards the end of your career, that's one of the things you hope you've done. Hopefully I'm not done quite yet. But so today we're going to talk about my book and give you some musical examples of both Jimmie Strother's music and music that would have influenced him. So we're talking about Virginia traditions, Black culture, particularly in the late 19th century, which is really not very well described or researched. I'm going to open by just reading you literally the first paragraph of the book. Go ahead, Jim, sing. James Lee Strother obliged. A comedic ditty poured forth into the Library of Congress's microphone and hulking recording machine. The blind musician's lively banjo rang out against the stark brick walls of the Virginia State Prison farm cell block. He sang of lame mules, unfaithful women, frolicking bullfrogs, gunshot devils, and Moses in the wilderness. Strother next picked up his guitar, its insistent rhythms driving a spiritual, while fellow prisoner Jame Lee's keening vocals doubled Strother's baritone voice. Blues, work songs, medicine show numbers, and risque rags filled the air. By the end of the day, June 14, 1936, the recording machine had inscribed, however imperfectly, a lifetime of music making on aluminum discs. And parenthetically, that was not supposed to be the opening of the book. But when a fellow musician named Dom Flemons, who I've probably mentioned a few times today, a young Black musician who's really gotten into a lot of this early folk music, he said, "You're completely missing the lead. You got to start with the recording session. That's what, if we didn't have that, we wouldn't even know who this guy was." And it's true. Those 15 recordings that he made set him apart from thousands of other people who were out there playing on the streets, itinerant musicians. And so it is important to start at that building block, which is the recording session itself. This is James Lee Strother on the left, playing guitar, and that is Jame Lee, who's the other vocalist on the recording, one of his recordings. Most of them are solo. And that is the Virginia State Prison farm out on Route 6, which shut down a few years ago. This marker, I think we dedicated in 2003. And so you can tell I've been working on this for a while. So let's hear a little bit of Jimmie Strother and Jame Lee singing an old spiritual tune called "Do Lord Remember Me." One of the things you might have heard in that is that rhythmic pulse that you hear on the bass. And it's actually Jame Lee is using a pair of straws or maybe knitting needles. It was done in various ways. He's essentially creating a rhythm on the bass string as Strother plays. And it's an old technique that was used in old-time fiddling as well. That goes back before the Civil War. One of the things that this song tells us is that Strother, who was born in 1881 in Culpeper County in northern Piedmont, he was absorbing material that was earlier than him, right? He was listening to music that came out of the time of slavery. So his mother had been enslaved. Many of his older generation would have been. And so that's part of his repertoire, is this older music. But what's interesting about Strother particularly is he then learns modern styles. I say modern in the sense of his own time, like blues. And so he is a classic, what was called back in the day, a songster. Sometimes people use the term musicianer. And that's one of the things I really think that made Lomax particularly keen on making 15 recordings, which was a lot for a field session. Typically, he would never record an artist that many songs by a particular artist. So let's listen, or let me read again, just as a letter that Harold Spivak, who was with the Library of Congress and accompanied John Lomax, the folklorist, to the prison farm. And he's writing to Lomax after the fact, describing the session. The warden had expected us and prepared for us a reception in typical Hollywood fashion. He and his family were sitting on the veranda of his house, while on the lawn in front he had a Negro quartet, which burst into song the moment we appeared. On the steps of the house was sitting a blind Negro strumming a battered banjo. On hearing the quartet, you said something to me about trouble ahead, which I did not understand, but which became perfectly clear to me later. For the next 2 hours, you sat on the steps with the blind Negro, whom you soon recognized as a real talent for folk singing, and did nothing but get acquainted. It was then I realized what a consummate artist you are. He's really buttering up Lomax. You encouraged him to tell his life story. You swapped songs with him and did everything but make records. So the first day, all Lomax did was just absorb who this person was. Next day, they come back, and it's when they actually made the recordings. One of the things that we see here, and is well known really about John Lomax, is that he had some very specific ideas of what he thought folk music was. And it would be a surprise if he didn't guide Jimmie Strother to a certain extent in the kinds of music he wanted him to play. And that would include spiritual material like this. I should also mention that Joe Lee, who accompanied Strother on that one song, Do Lord Remember Me, also was recorded, I think maybe 6 or 7 songs at the session, and as just a cappella singing, beautiful material, and is an interesting person, and who I found a lot out about, which we really didn't know anything about him before my book. This is where that took place. That's the superintendent's house at the state prison farm where John Lomax and Harold Spivak first saw Jimmie Strother. This is from an advertising piece for a recording that Lomax made called The Ballad Hunter. So Lomax always foregrounded himself. You know, he was like the Livingston of the story, going into the deep South to record this stuff. And I think this image kind of gives you a sense of how he kind of positioned himself vis-a-vis the musicians that he was recording. So we're going to start our live music with a tune that goes way back and is still widely performed in bluegrass, called typically it's usually called Cripple Creek, but Jimmie Strother called it I Thought I Heard My Banjo Say. And we're going to perform it first, then we can kind of talk about the song. Get that out of the way. Whoops.
Thought I heard my banjo say. Thought I heard my banjo say.
Gonna cripple keep, going to town. Leave old cripple keep, going to roam. Going up cripple keep, shooting off heads. Don't eat nothing but chosen bread.
Thought I heard my banjo say. Thought I heard my banjo say.
Gonna cripple keep, going down. Gonna rip free, going to roam. Gonna cripple keep, when I feel. Make my bitches up to
Thought I heard banjo say, my banjo sound. Thought I heard my banjo sound.
Leave no crib beat. Amen. With common sense, go that fosters a romance.
Thought I heard my banjo say, my banjo sound. Thought I heard my banjo sound.
Leave no crib beat. Take worth a cabbage, I'm worth a line. Gonna leave your town, I'm getting high. Going down a crib beat, shooting off heads. Don't need nothing but shooting.
Thought I heard my banjo say, my banjo sound. Thought I heard my banjo sound. Going to Cripple Creek, leaving Cripple Creek.
Read and run, boy, read and run. Drinking whiskey, drinking beer. Don't let sundown get you near. So that last line, it's pretty ominous, isn't it? So this is before the Green Book. And anybody who was an itinerant musician or traveler had to reckon with the fact that there were sundown towns. And there's a dark element in a lot of Jimmie Strother songs. And this guy's lived a really, really hard life because he was a street musician. And so that's kind of an ever-present in Strother's music. There's messages he's sending out to the Black community and his people, and other songs that are clearly intended for a different audience. It's kind of a shame that that's the only song we have from Jimmie Strother that really reflects what we might consider old-time music or country, so or at least the roots of country. And of course, that's been a debate recently with Cowboy Carter, right? Is people flipping out about a pop artist kind of not wandering, intentionally moving into country, and people pushing back on that by rightly saying that, well, hello, African Americans were playing this thing, which came from where? Exactly. So we know that there were Black artists that were performing what today we would call old time or country music, and this is a really good example of that. We're going to do another tune for you that also harkens back to that tradition. And here I'm going to do what should be technically very impossible, and that's tune a banjo on stage. So this is a song called Roustabout. And it's an interesting tune because it's one that was performed by Black artists, including this gentleman, Josh Thomas, who was from the Roanoke area. He was actually recorded by some Hollins College students. There really aren't a lot of good recordings, field recordings, or commercial recordings of African Americans playing these styles of music. Dink Roberts from North Carolina played this tune. But it's one that, as often happens with folk tunes, migrated into the repertoire of mountain white people. So you have Fred Cochran, for instance, does a very famous version of this tune as well. So we're going to give you a little of this song, or a little of Roustabout.
roused about, oh, roused about. Tell me where you've been so long. Been in the pen with those rough and rowdy men. Honey, I'm going back again. Hop high, hop high, hop high. Oh, baby, hop high, my little gal. Where'd you get those brand new shoes? Dresses that you wear so fine. Got those shoes from a railroad man, dresses from a driver in the mine. Hop high, hop high, hop high. Oh, baby, oh, hop high, my little gal. Who's gonna shoe your pretty little feet? Who's gonna love your hand? Papa will shoe my pretty little feet. Mama will glove my hand. Hop high, hop high, hop high. Baby, oh, hop high, my little gal. Who's gonna kiss your red ruby lips? Who's gonna be your man? No one is kissing my red ruby lips, and I don't need no man. Hop high, hop high, hop high. Oh, baby, hop high, my little gal.
Thank you. So I always think that some of those types of songs that I think clearly came out of the Black tradition, they're a lot more angular, and I think the rhythmic pulse is very different than a lot of the kinds of banjo playings you would see. You probably saw I was using a technique that's called clawhammer banjo. So I was like striking down on the strings, which is kind of the earliest style. And of course your thumb's got to keep playing on the drone string. So, great songs, great music. They came from a much earlier tradition. As I said, Strother was a very well-rounded musician, and one of the things Lomax really wanted and asked several artists for, he called them complaining songs, like how tough life was. Life was definitely tough. Sometimes he would ask people for songs like that. He asked Blind Willie McTell down in Atlanta, and McTell was kind of put off. He's like, if you were reading inside his brain, it was probably like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to play some songs like that for this guy. But Strother did do a really interesting complaining song. And he, of course, growing up where he did, was in a very highly agricultural environment where he grew up in Culpeper. And, whoops, sorry. He also would go on to work in Baltimore in the steel mills at Sparrows Point. But he sang a song that it's a little unusual. The first line is, I used to work for tractors, kind of how it sounds, but it's clear that tractor is kind of a contraction of contractor. Then he goes on to say, Mike Hardy was his name. So let's listen to a little bit of Jimmie Strother play that song.
Want me to make for the day, on you will lay. Early in the morning, got so bit of day. Then I return in the evening, see all the working play. When the work is gone, get your money go away. Then you live that boy, you home. Oh, my God, and he was mad. Get my money, he got bad. With that you live that boy, you home. You took on checking like honey was the name. Want me to make for the day, doggone you
Wanted me to make 4 loads a day, doggone mule was lame. So this is a labor song. And a really interesting one is, again, a kind of a rarity among some of these early field recordings. And here's where Jimmie ended up working. This is the Sparrows Point. At the time he worked, it was the Maryland Steel Corporation. Later, it was bought out and became, it was operational well into the late 20th century. Enormous steel mill that sat right on the Chesapeake Bay. And this is, I found out, unlike Lomax, who said that Strother had been blinded in a coal mining accident, this is actually where he lost his sight. There was an explosion, which was not an unusual occurrence in the furnaces there. And we know by 1910, he's in the census, he's listed as a musician, and his place of employment is public. So he was a street musician. Whoops. I'll have to pick those up eventually. This is his mugshot from the state penitentiary. And if you look at it carefully at his face, you can see there's multiple scars that probably testify to that disaster. This is where he landed in Baltimore in 1910. This area right here is a couple blocks away from his house, and it was called the Lung Block. Any idea why? Highest tuberculosis rate in the entire city of Baltimore. Cab Calloway actually describes this area because he lived right above it in a black middle class neighborhood as just being the toughest place. Lots, prostitution, drugs, alcohol, that it was just really rough. And then Jimmie Strother also branches out and starts playing for minstrel shows, medicine shows, which incorporate elements of the old minstrel shows. And you can see here, yes, that is a black person in blackface. This is actually a Ben Shahn photograph from the federal, New Deal image collections at Library of Congress. You see the man with the Indian headdress? There was this whole mystique about cure-alls and Indians. They knew these secrets of salves and various things, and therefore it became a real symbol of the medicine show, incorporating those kinds of characters. But Jimmie Strother's job for the medicine show was, of course, to attract the audience. And I think you see here the ad. This is from the Baltimore Afro-American advertising for somebody exactly like Jimmie Strother, right? Open air medicine man, work all summer, must sing strong. We have these things. If you were going to be a street musician or anybody playing outdoors, you had to have a really powerful voice. So let's play one of his songs that was, I think, probably one of his hallmark tunes for the medicine shows. Let me grab my lyrics. Let's see. So this is called Tennessee Dog. Well, does anybody here want to buy a little dog? Come right here, I'll sell you. Ain't no catfish, ain't no hog, and I'm right here to tell you. That dog, that Tennessee dog, his head is long, ears is flat, and he never stops eating till he balls that Jack, that dog. Talk about that dog. He's the meanest dog that come from Tennessee. Now he eats more meat than any butcher dog, eats steaks, pork chop, and liver. Catch more rats than any other cat on this side of Mississippi River. That dog, that dog, that. Talking about that dog. What about him? Oh, his head is long, his ears is flat, and he never stops eating till he balls that Jack, that dog. Lay down there, that mean little dog. I said lay down. He's the meanest dog that come from Tennessee. Well, does anybody here want to buy a little dog? I'm right here to sell you. No catfish, ain't no hog, and I'm right here to tell you. That dog, that Tennessee dog. Oh, his head is long, ears is flat, and he never stops eating till he balls that Jack, that dog. Lay down there, mean little dog. He's the meanest dog that come from Tennessee. Why, say, come here to me, Tabby, balls right up and shiver. Catch more rats than any other cat on this side of Mississippi River. That dog, that dog, that dog, that mean little dog. Oh, his head is long, ears is flat, and he never stops eating till he balls that Jack, that dog. Talking about that dog. He's the meanest dog that come from Tennessee. I mean. So it's just a very fun little kind of nonsense song, I guess you would say. But you know, that's the kind of song you'd want it to get to attract some folks to your medicine shows. And some of these things would travel around, and they'd go into a town. They'd set up on a little vacant lot, or even right on the street, maybe in a town at a square, and they were unbelievably popular. You know, there's counts of people, hundreds of people coming to these things. All right. One of the really, this is where research and serendipity are interesting, and also the fact that we now can digitize stuff. Like I remember reading about 30 years of the Richmond papers when I was doing my dissertation and first book. Now I go online and I have the Baltimore Sun, and I can search it by a keyword. And guess what? In 1915, the newspapers were full of stories about Jimmie Strother, kind of about Jimmie Strother, but really about a kind of an interesting issue. And this is something that I really became more realized that it became more and more important to the work I was doing, and that is his disability. So how is it that he's in the paper in 1915? Well, it turns out that his first wife, Mary, worked for William Stone. William Stone was one of the leaders of the Republican Party in Maryland. In fact, he was such an important Republican that he was given the federal sinecure of, he was the collector of the Port of Baltimore, which was a presidential appointment. So Mary works as his cook. And she comes home one day to his house one day and says, my husband, James Lee Strother, is being prevented from playing on the streets because he's blind. William Stone is outraged by this, and he writes this scathing letter addressed to this guy Magruder, a minister who's the head of the charities in Baltimore. And they engage in this back and forth about why is this? Why is it that these charity people, these progressives, are preventing from doing that? And the answer is that it's beneath the dignity. They should be in the workshop for the blind, caning chairs. And so there's this thin line between Strother and what is considered begging, right? He's got a skill. He's obviously pretty good. But to the Federated Charities, he shouldn't be out there. It's an embarrassment. People don't want to see that on the streets, good middle-class people. Now, this is also an interesting debate because it shows a clear split between how particularly black and white people perceive people on the streets performing, but also it's a class issue because there is a black middle class that also is not happy about this portrayal of themselves on the streets. And so in the book, I explore this whole issue of what it meant really to be blind in this culture. You know, Stone goes back to an older idea of Christian charity, right? Remember the giving alms, right? We're supposed to take care of the poor people. I won't go there. I won't go there. Okay. But at any rate, so Jimmie Strother eventually comes back to Virginia. He meets a young woman who I think both families knew each other. These are not big communities. And he marries a woman named Blanche Green, who's at least 20 years his junior, and who was working at the time as a domestic servant in Alexandria. They return, and by 1930, they're living in the town of Culpeper. And Jimmie Strother is working at a music hall, is what it says in the census. She is a domestic servant for a prominent family in the town of Culpeper. So this is where some very interesting things happen. One of the things when he comes back to Culpeper is there's this new music that's really coming to the fore, and that is something that's often termed Piedmont blues, a style you may have heard. You may have heard people like John Cephas or John Jackson, who was in neighboring Rappahannock County, who we all knew, and sometimes got a chance to play on the same stages as he did. And so there's this style of Virginia blues that's very prominent. One of those prominent parts of it, and culturally, was that the house party. We didn't really have the classic kind of jukes and things that you had in places like Mississippi, but people like John Cephas described performing at these house parties where people would just, they'd cook up some food and they would, get some liquor in, and they'd have all-night parties in people's houses. And so we're going to play a tune that's contemporary with him coming back to Culpeper by John Cephas and Phil Wiggins, who you see here, and gives you a sense of this kind of newer Piedmont-style blues music that was emerging, and that Jimmie Strother, very as he would as a traveling musician, decided, I need to be playing this. Apologize. Never change your strings before a gig, this soon before a gig. You'll thank me later.
Just talk among yourselves.
There we go. So this is Richmond Blues. 1, 2, 3.
was standing down in Richmond on the corner of Broad and Main. A policeman said to me, son, what is your right name? And I said my name, that's a stamp right on my shirt. I'm a natural born lover's man, I sure ain't got to work. I can drink muddy water, sleep in a hollow log. I'll do anything, but I sure ain't gonna be your dog. Sometimes I feel like snapping my pistol in your face. Then some old graveyard will be your resting place. Graveyard, graveyard, it's a low down dirty place. Lay flat on your back, throw mud all up in your face. Well, I wrote one line and I lay my pencil down. My heart struck sorrow and tears came rolling down. I was standing down in Richmond on the corner of Broad and Main. A policeman said to me, son, what is your right name? A policeman said to me, son, what is your right name? He walked right up and he said, what is your right name? Thank you.
So that's what we often call an 8-bar blues. And it's one, I think, one of the earlier forms. And not surprisingly, Jimmie Strother took that cue from that and played some songs in that style. You might be wondering at this point, why was James Lee Strother in prison? This is why. He killed his second wife, Blanche, in April of 1935. This is where his trial was held. This, by the way, some of these pictures, my sister's a photographer, and she kindly went around with me to all these weird places that I was studying and took a whole series of photos that are in the book. So this is the courthouse where he was never really tried. The grand jury indicted him fairly quickly, and he pled guilty to second-degree murder and got a 20-year sentence. So he goes to the state penitentiary, but of course, because of his disability, they quickly transferred him to the state prison farm. And he does a song called Going to Richmond. This song is very biographical. And I think you'll get the idea once I play it, and we'll have a little chat afterwards. This is clearly about Blanche. Well, I'm going to Richmond on my way to paradise. Gonna find that woman, you know, she should unwreck my life. I'm going to Richmond by way of Tennessee. I'm gonna find that woman, fool of me. Those Alexandria women, you know I sure do despise. They got a handful of gimme and a mouthful of much obliged. Well, those young women will tell you they'll love you all your life. Go around the corner to another dude and retell that same lie twice. Play it again for me now. Well, you know I've played this song till my fingers got sore. If there ain't nothing doing, boy, you know I ain't gonna play no more. You know I'm going to Richmond by way of Tennessee. Gonna find that woman, you know, sure made a fool of me. Where did he meet Blanche? Alexandria. Those Alexandria women, they got a mouthful of I've got it backwards.
Gimme.
Mouthful of gimme and a handful of gimme and a mouthful of much obliged.
Gimme.
Gimme. So this is a very personal song, even though that's a standard blues line, like it's in multiple songs. But clearly he's in his letters when he's trying to get his pardon from Governor Price, this is his strategy. His main strategy is to blame his wife. He basically says, because I was blind, she beat me, she blah, blah, blah. The governor actually was I was amazed at the bureaucracy. He writes letters to the Commonwealth's attorney and Culpeper and to the superintendent of the penitentiary saying, "Shall let this guy out?" And he's also got a nephew in Baltimore who's writing also and saying, "Look, I'll take him in if you let him go." And so the Commonwealth's attorney down up in Culpeper basically says he writes a long letter that says he's lying. He was the abuser. Everybody in town knows it. But the last paragraph is, "I don't care where he goes as long as he doesn't come back to Culpeper." Right? And that's what happens. He gets released and he goes back to his nephew. And this is the irony of it, right? Because this nephew, I found this out through genealogic research. He was kind of a second cousin as well as a nephew of Jimmie. And they had also in the Great Migration gone up to Baltimore. And his mother died within 6 months of his birth. And so clearly Strother had taken him in. And basically he wrote in a letter, William Taylor was his name, said he's like a father to me. So, you have to square all of this with the other things that he did. when you're thinking about it. So it's like any good story, it's a lot more complicated than you might think it is. So this is the Green Homestead in Culpeper County. It's, of course, pretty much fallen down. One of the most poignant, I guess, at least for me, moments in writing the book. I like to go to the places that everything happened, and I went up to Culpeper a lot, spent a lot of time in the courthouse, and met Zan Nelson, who is a local historian there, who knows everybody. And she got me in contact with Blanche's grandson. And he really didn't know this story at all. And he came to Culpeper, and Zan and I, and he and his wife, we toured. He showed me the homestead. He used to come here in summer. They actually lived in New Jersey. His father, who was, of course, the son of Blanche, was living in the house when the murder occurred. He was about 15 years old. He leaves and goes to an aunt up in the New Jersey area. So he'd come to Culpeper, knew Culpeper, but nobody talked about this. Obviously it was that family secret, that people have. And I was just really grateful that Jim and his wife were very welcoming and really helped me do research on the family I never could have done otherwise. We're going to finish up with a song. This is a song by, again, it kind of in this same style, although I think this is just a very unique take on this song. It's a really classic song called Crow Jane that was covered by bluesmen all the way from Mississippi to Virginia and everywhere else. But Carl Martin, who you see here, who was born in Big Stone Gap down in the coal country, who is another one of these great songsters, did this version of it, which we really love to play. He was, again, a nice way to kind of cap things. He played in a string band with a fellow named Howard Armstrong, who often his nickname was Louie Bluey. And Armstrong is a fascinating character, and there's actually a great documentary about him called Louie Bluey. It's not safe for work. Don't let your kids watch it, but it's amazing. And he's a fascinating person and actually a really good visual artist too. But he and Carl Martin played together in the late 20s and early 30s, and they would travel, to lumber camps and coal camps and perform. And so they were playing. One of the ironies, they put out a record on the Vocalion label in 1930, but the company didn't know what to do with it because they had a hillbilly label, and then you had the race label, they called it. That was where black music went. And the companies didn't understand what was this record, because it was an old-time string band, but it kind of had a fiddle in it, but it was kind of bluesy. And so they put it out on both series, but on one, the band was called the Tennessee Chocolate Drops. And if you've heard of the North Carolina Chocolate Drops, that's where they got their name. And the other label just said the Tennessee Trio, and they put it out on the hillbilly label. So this shows you how kind of the larger culture can shape who plays what music, right? Influences that. So we love this version of this song. And who is it? One of our friends down up in Culpeper, Jeffrey Scott, who is a really interesting, great musician and a relative of John Jackson's. He always asks me to play this song. He says, play the finger snap song.
Crow Jane, don't hold your head so high. Crow Jane, Don't hold your head so high, for you must remember you got to come down and die. If you don't want me, baby, just give me your right hand. If you don't want me, baby, just give me your right hand. Go on back to your woman, and I'll go back to my man. Mama, she told me when she took my hand, my mama, she told me when she took my hand, if you get into trouble, girl, do the best you can.
Thank you.
One thing that is really important also to think about with Jimmie is that the Library of Congress people obviously really liked his recordings, so he started putting out some of his material while he was still alive in the early 40s. And so this is one of those recordings. And one of the songs that became really well known was a song called The Bloodstained Banders, which is, this is part of a transcription of it. Whoops. Here's a little bit of it. So, and just to finish, I promise this will be the end. Here is another version of that same song, Jimmie Lives On.
Over the other shore, stay out of the way of the bloodstained band. one for Saturday, one for today. My heart is yours. Can you hear my friends calling? Oh, good shepherd, feed my sheep.
So there's a whole section of the book that's just about the legacy and some of the ways his songs have been used. This is where he is buried in Baltimore at Mount Auburn Cemetery, and one of the, I think, most beautiful images that my sister captured for the book. So that's our presentation today. I want to thank all of you for coming out.
Thank you. Thank you. That was delightful. We are at time, so I don't think we're going to be able to do a Q&A here, but we do have a book signing out in the main lobby, and Gregg said he would be happy to answer questions while you are getting your book signed. So thank you guys so much again. This was so great, and thank you all for coming. One more round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon, and please do join us on June 19th at noon again for Jerry Willis.
She said